Remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and the plot should not be forgotten. I know his name is Guy Fawkes in 1605. He attempted to blow up the parliament, and we are told to remember the idea, not the man, because man can fail.
V for Vendetta by Alan Moore and David Lloyd.
Characters of V for Vendetta.
V. Evie Hammond, Eric Finch, Peter Creedy, Helen Hayer, Louis Prothero, Harper Elster, Anthony James Lilliman Conrad, Mr. Etheridge, Delia Surridge, Gordon Dittrich, Rosemary Almond, Valerie Page, Adam Susan, Roger Descombe, Derek Almond, and Dominic Stone.
Alan Moore was born on November 18, 1953, in England to working-class parents Sylvia and Ernest Moore. Moore began his career by publishing poetry and essays in small independent magazines. Moore continued his examination of Dark Side of Heroes with V for Vendetta, a comic about shadowy, vengeful superhero which ran from 1982 to 1986. David Lloyd was born on May 5, 1950, in England and an English comics artist, best known as the illustrator of the story V for Vendetta. Alan Moore considers Lloyd to be a full partner in the success of V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta consists of 3 books. On November 5, Evie Hammond gets ready to go out on the streets for her first night of soliciting customers for sex while the voice of fate broadcasts the evening news. Evie is nervous and approaches a few men awkwardly. At this moment, the masked V appears, tear gases and kills the men. After saving Evie, he carries Evie off the rooftop where they catch the parliament building blow up, V's other handiwork. England is run by a tyrannical regime called Moore's Fire. The head of the government is Adam Susan, known as the leader. The leader resides at the head or the government offices and rules England with an iron fist, making use of his government's institution. The finger is the law enforcement, the nose, the counter-terrorism, the eye is video surveillance, and Jordan Tower is the propaganda, and the leader controls England using an advanced computer called Fate. The voice of Fate, who communicates regularly with the populace over the radio, is a man named Louis Prothero, who is fond of collecting dolls. The people are supposed to think that the voice they hear is actually Fate talking, and Prothero's delivery makes the voice more human and believable. Meanwhile, Via takes Evie to a place he calls the Shadow Gallery. The story then cuts when V kidnaps Prothero and he leaves his symbol as V with a circle around it on the wall. Eric Finch, the leader of Nose, investigates the dead bodies in train, while V returns to the Shadow Gallery where he finds Evie Hammond crying. He asks her questions about herself and she admits that she's only 16 years old. Evie tells V about her past and explaining that she was 7 when Britain was suddenly underwater and the rest of the world seems to have been destroyed, presumably from nuclear war. When Evie was 10, her mother died from an illness that also killed many other people, and the government didn't do anything because there wasn't any government anymore. Evie decided to try prostitution to make more money, and V embraces her while she was crying. Prothero is then confused and frightened at the reproduction of the gate to the Larkhill resettlement camp. V appears, while Prothero insists that he had nothing to do with the camp, but V keeps talking to him as though he had been there, telling him to remember the good old days. He asks Prothero if he remembered the medical experiments that Prothero performed on the camp prisoners. Prothero reveals that V was the man from the room 5. Later, At the New Scotland Yard, Prothero is found laying on the sidewalk. His face has been painted like a doll's and he's only able to whimper, "Mama." At 11 o'clock, the following evening, a new voice of faith comes over the radio, causing worry and alarm to the public. The leader, whose name is Adam Sousa, narrates his belief in fascism, racial superiority, and tightly controlled society. He believes freedom is a luxury that was destroyed by the war. V blows up the statue on the top of the Central Criminal Court, citing his belief in anarchy and his bitter feelings about the lack of justice in the current society. Avi Hamon decided to help V. As the congregation leaves the church, Bishop Lilliman, who gives the sermon, talks to his butler Denise to request a girl, and the door opens to reveal Avi Hamon dressed like a young girl. And the bishop is pleased despite her age being given to him as 15. Inside the abbey, Bishop Lilliman makes a move on Avi, and before he can take off Avi's dress, Avi hits him in the face with a lamp. And that's when V appears. Finch, Derek Allman, and Finch assistant Dominic Stone show up at Westminster Abbey to investigate Bishop Anthony Lehman's murder, and V has again left his symbol on the wall. Finch plucks a purple rose from the bishop's dead hand. Ear cannot get any information about the murder case because V turned on Beethoven's Fifth so loud in the background. Avi Hamon feels horrified that she let him kill another human. V remains calm, and after Avi leaves, he says, "You'll learn, Avi." In the next scene, Rosemary Almond talks to his husband about the relationship, but Derek punches him in the face. Meanwhile, at the nose, Finch starts to put together the puzzle pieces about the recent murders. He uses Louis Prothero's Room 5 clue to narrow in on the resettlement camps. They use Roman numerals to number their rooms, and the numeral for 5 is a V. Dr. Delia Surridge takes the purple rose home to study it. Dr. Surridge asks if V is going to kill her, and V holds up a syringe and says he already did while she was asleep. Dr. Surridge asks to see V's face, and when he obliged by removing his mask, she replies that his face is beautiful. Derek Almonds arrives and confronts V, but he has forgotten to load the gun, and V kills him with his hands. Finch arrives at the leader's office and informs him that the motive for the murders is a vendetta. He also gives the leader the news that Derek Almond is dead. Finch then reads Dr. Surridge's diary aloud to the leader. Dr. Surridge's diary is a key clue in unveiling the mystery of V. The diary confirms Louis Prothero's involvement and describes Dr. Surridge's role in the experiments. She is given 4 dozen test subjects to undergo a hormone treatment, most of whom die in the following weeks. The man in room 5 is the only subject who doesn't seem to have any physical manifestations of the hormone treatment, but also seems to have lost his mind as a result. Months later, a huge explosion denotes in the camp resulted for room 5 experiment, which is V. Finch includes there are 2 possible motives for the murders. First, V was simply wanted revenge in the people who work at the camp, and the second theory is that V was just clearing the ground by killing everyone who could identify him. Finch notes that it seems like V left the diary to be found on purpose, because he also removed 4 pages from it, pages that could have revealed his identity or other essential information. Avi tentatively broaches the fact that V has never shown any sexual interest in her, and she suspects that V is her father. V blindfolds Avi and instructs her to follow him. After walking for a while, she takes the blindfold off, finding herself on an unknown street, with V repeating part of Enid Blyton's series, and then telling her that he isn't her father, and that her father is dead. Evie becomes extremely upset and agitated. Evie is left alone in the street. V enters in Jordan Tower, where the government controls all television in London and broadcast. V fights and kills his way up to the broadcasting room, where he threatens the staff with explosives in order to get them to play the tape he has brought. The tape begins to play, broadcasting presumably to all the televisions in London. V appears in the tape and speaks as though to all humankind, informing everyone that their work's been sleeping and that he's thinking about letting them go. On the tape, V lists some of the accomplishments of humankind and also including the bad side of the government. Leaders have great power, which current residents of London are letting themselves to be brainwashed and controlled by the government. He tells people that they lack motivation and the drive to take any real responsibility. In his video, V comments on human weaknesses and tells his audience that one of the worst crimes humans commit is hurting the ones they love. He makes a not so subtle criticism of the leader's bad management, comparing him to figures like Hitler and Mussolini. The police shoot V and he falls out of the window of the broadcasting room to lie crumpled on the pavement below. Evie awakens to find herself in a prison cell with no light except what comes through a small window. A rat is her only companion, and she is given a plate of moldy food that she cannot eat, and Evie's head is shaved. She is thrown back into a cell and again leaves her food to be eaten by the rat. She then finds a letter written on toilet paper stuck in a hole in the wall, penned by a woman named Valerie Page. Valerie tells whoever is reading her words that she loves them, and they must hold onto that final inch of themselves, and that is their integrity, even to death. Then a realization crashes down to Evie that V planned all those present acts and torture scene because V loves her and wants to set her free. V tells Evie that Valerie was the woman in room 4, that her words set V 5 years.
It gives the leader a report of what's going on, but in the middle of it, the leader mutters, "I love you."
Rosemary Almond buy again from the gangster named Alistair Harper or Ali. Riots and looting break out all over London and the government can contain them. Evie asks V if this is anarchy, and he replies that this is not anarchy, it is just chaos. Right before, Mary is full of pain and regret and fear, and she can't sleep because of it. She wants justice in the world. Dominic figures out how V has been controlling everything and goes to warn the leader that V has access to their computer system or fate. Eric Finch, or poison, turns out to be LSD. He takes a large dose of it in hope of coming to an understanding of what really happened on Lark Hill and what happened to V. In his hallucinations, he sees the people and families who were taken there, and he sees her lover, Dr. Delia Soray, the other in charge of Lark Hill. They inject V with something and throw him in room 5. Meanwhile, V shows Evie a room full of TV monitors that show all the surveillance footage in London, revealing that V had knocked out the government's monitors, but the cameras are still functioning, and Evie pleads that she doesn't understand what V is trying to tell her.
but only to hear,
"Farewell, my lovely." When Finch stumbles across an abandoned Victoria Underground station, he realizes that he has found V's lair and enters the underground to find V's train full of plants. While Rosemary makes her way through the crowd along the street as the motorcade passes, she walks up to the leader and points her gun at him, shooting him through the open door of his car. Rosemary Anmold faces torture and likely death as Peter greedy tries to discover whether or not she was hired by V. In the underground, Finch follows the sound of singing and finds himself face to face with V. He pulls a gun on and shoots him multiple times as V stabs him in the shoulder. V tells Finch that he is not a flesh and not a blood, but an idea and therefore cannot be killed. As V walks away, Finch realizes that he is sitting in a pool of V's blood that has killed him after all. Eric Finch stumbles into the room and announces that he has killed V, but Finch pretends to not be able to remember where V's base is. Meanwhile, Creedy goes to visit Ali to talk about their deal, and Ali turns on Creedy and kills him with a razor. Conrad plays a tape which reveals Helen and Alistair Harper, or Ali, conducting an affair. He manages to fatally slash Conrad with the razor. Helen returns home to find Ali dead and Conrad dying. At the Shadow Gallery, V stumbles into a room and collapses in front of Evie Hammond. Evie holds V as he dies, and he tells her that she must discover whose face lies behind this mask.
But instead,
She never knew his face. He also lied. He also asked Evie to give him a Viking funeral. V's last word are Latin phrase that is salute and farewell. Evie thinks about what V has told her about anarchy as she walks up the stairs, hoping to find V in the main gallery, still alive. And she understands that what she must do is become V. It must be her face beneath the mask. Dominic for orders, as he is the only high-level authority figure left. Dominic is reluctant and confused and stands on the edge of the rioting crowds when the sound of Big Ben chiming comes out of the loudspeaker. He looks up to see the figures of V, and that new V is Evie Hammond. V tells the crowd that anarchy offers them another path and warns them to choose carefully. The
new V, or Evie,
prepares V for his Viking funeral. She narrates, insisting that she will not lead the people but instead help them build. She watches from the rooftop as the train blows up right under Drowning Street.
after V, or Evie, rescued Dominic, he let him in the Shadow Gallery.
People are still in the streets, not rioting but waiting. Finch says that people need symbols, as fact that V is being remembered but the government had forgotten. And Finch walks off down the highway out of London.